Tonight on the Matt Gaetz Show, we're on location in San Salvador, El Salvador, and I've got an exclusive interview coming up with the vice president of this country regarding how Salvadorians are thinking about being at the center of the news cycle in the United States, their war against MS-13, and the future partnership of these two nations working together. Plus, I've got an exclusive interview with the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, regarding all of the new files that have been released on the RFK assassination, the leakers that are now going to be potentially prosecuted following the reveal of classified information, and a new pope has been chosen. We'll get DC Drano's take on that and so much more. It's all next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this. We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
It's no surprise to anyone who watches this program that years ago I became a big fan of Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele. El Salvador for so long had been just the butt of jokes, or a place where sorrow emerged out of death and warfare and gangs and destruction. MS-13 got their hold in El Salvador after growing in prisons in Southern California. After those prisoners were deported, they found a very permissive environment in this small Central American country. And so they became almost as powerful as the government. Neighborhoods, streets, businesses, transport, all run by the gangs. Gangs and violence certainly have impacted other countries in Central America, and many of those are still dealing with the challenges. But what you see in El Salvador is victory. Somehow, President Bukele was able to marshal the spirit of this nation to fight back. And now the prosperity is evident. Not only has El Salvador been deemed the principal and leading security partner for the United States when it comes to the deportation of criminal gangs, they've also invited more tourists as the State Department has lowered the travel advisory. They've embraced Bitcoin as a form of legal tender in the nation, and the future is as bright as ever. We now will review the history of this country, the present challenges and operations that are ongoing with the United States, and a future that seems bright in the land of the everlasting wave and the eternal smile. El Salvador is indeed at the center of all discussions in the world regarding so much important news, and we are joined now by the Vice President of El Salvador, Felix Ulloa. Mr. Vice President, it's so good to see you again. With El Salvador being at the center of so much international discussion, I wanted my viewers to get a better sense of the rich history of the country, of the culture here, and maybe if we could just start with you telling me a little bit about what El Salvador was like when you grew up and how it's different today.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to talk to you. And of course, speaking of my own country, it is not an honor, but also a pleasure. Well, as you know, El Salvador is the little and smaller country in the Americas. But in spite of the small territory, we have had important roles in the historical process. We led the process in the independence from Spain in the 18th century, and then we became one of the first republic to exporting coffee in the 19th century. In the 20th century, we also led some different, let's say, special issues that led the country to move forward and presenting as a new state, leading aside and behind all the feudal way of our historical process. We became a republic, modern republic in the 1950 with a new constitution, but then we suffered a civil war in the 80s. More recently, and after the peace agreement in 1992, we believed that we were ready to start a new country, to build a second republic after the independence from Spain, but instead we got another social war that was led by the Maras, with the gangs, that was the result of the absence of the state in the communities, in the society. Many of the dysfunctional families coming from the Civil War, they had kids and children that were abandoned. They became part of this member. They start like, small, people like doing some sort of robberies and stuff like that in the street. But then when the gang members from the United States were sent back to El Salvador, they became a more structured organization, and they became a power who started growing up and up to a point that they challenged the state. They control the community, they control the life, the daily life of the person in the community, and that was the worst part of the recent history in our country, when we suffered this pandemic of the gangs over 30 years. It was until the President Bukele decided to declare the wars against the gangs that we started living in this new country. The renaissance of El Salvador started when we declared the war against the gangs in March 2022, and most of them were imprisoned. We have in jail more than 85,000 members of the gangs, and the harmony and the peace went back to the communities. Now, the normal life start in the communities. People start smiling, the children start playing on the streets, things that you can figure out 5 years ago when the gangs controlled this in the neighborhood. And we start giving back many houses. 3,500 houses have been given back to the owners in one neighborhood called La Campanera. Those houses were taken by the gangs, saying to the owners, you have 24 hours to leave the house because I want the house. So that was the way that we live in the recent past. Now this is a new country, and because that, you can find now new people smiling, enjoying their lives, going to the public places, to the parks, to the squares, whatever, the beaches. We have, by the way, the most beautiful beaches in the region. And that is one of the, putting it in a nutshell, all our history in El Salvador.
It is hard for Americans to think about gangs being that involved in every aspect of life. Even in places where gangs are strong in the United States, maybe they extort a few businesses, sell some drugs, make people a little bit afraid. But what you seem to be describing is a circumstance where the gangs controlled where you lived, where you could eat, where you could have recreation with your family. What did that do to the land of the everlasting smile?
It's hard to understand that there is only one explanation. Mm-hmm. It was the collusion of the governments in the past with the guerrilla. With the gangs. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, explain that to me, please.
Yes, of course. There were two-party systems in El Salvador in the past after the peace agreement. One from the right wing, which is called Arena, and one from the left wing, which was called FMLN. Arena governed this country for 20 years. FMLN governed this country for 10 years, from 1922 to 2019, when President Bukele took office. So during those years, you could see how the leaders of the party were dealing with the gangs in order to receive.
Well, that sounds like the gangs were in charge of the country, and then the leaders of the government worked for the gangs on both the right side and the left side.
Either ways. I mean, because the gangs have,
Well, how did you defeat them? I think there are other countries in Central America who struggle with the violence and the gangs. We see things getting worse in Costa Rica. We see President Moreno trying to fight them in Panama. We see the problems in Guatemala and Honduras. And El Salvador seems to be this shining example of victory for the people and for peace and prosperity. How have you been able to do here what your neighbors have not been able to do?
Well, it was, we had the chance to have a leader who took the leadership in society and challenged and defeating those criminal structures. It was not that easy. It took some time because, as I said, it was a collusion between the gangs and the two-party system that they govern in El Salvador, and they control the Congress. In the first 2 years that we were in office, from 2019 to 2021, we cannot do anything against the gang because they control the Congress. When we won elections at the parliamentary level in 2021, it was the turning point. It was at the moment when the Congress aligned with the executive branch, and then we start fighting against the gangs with all the power of the state, the institutions, in rule of law, respecting all the rule of law, basic on the democratic principles, but taking care that we are defending the human rights of the population at large. Because that was the problem. You know, just to give you one figure, from 2009 to 2019, in the two previous government to our government, we received the statistic from the Legal Institute, Medicine Institute. The chief was 41,000 killed Salvadorians in 1 decade, in 10 years. So
that was 41,000 people dead because of the gangs.
Because of the gang, killed. We don't talk about disappears, rapists, extortion, all those crimes. Just killed that were reported by this legal institute. So that was the country that we received. So the first challenge from President Bukele was to defeat the gangs.
And how did he inspire the people to defeat an institution so strong?
Well, the first step was to put in place the contour territorial plan, a 7-step plan that was in the first phase.
Did the judges try to get in the way of your victories against the
absolutely.
gangs?
This is something that is very hard to understand how we can succeed in this project, because you have to be involved with the judicial branch, with the legislative branch, and the executive branch. For instance, the executive branch, we had the police and the army to fight, but we have to have also the legal framework who allows you to capture these people and prosecute them. But you have to have also the judges which have the courage to do that, because in the past they were threatened by the gangs. I received a woman judge who came, crying to my office, showing me a picture that the chief of the gang sent it to her, showing the two girls, two daughters of her in the school. He sent it to the judge like a threat, in saying, if you judge me or you condemn me, I know who your daughters are in the school. So that judge...
Did you share that threat with your family?
I know, well, absolutely. We are, everybody in El Salvador were under this threat. No one sector was free of them. The issue is that...
Did you believe them, that they would kill
absolutely,
your family?
Yes. When she showed me that, I believe that, because it was a common history that we heard elsewhere. There was the same issue, the threat of the gangs, the collusion of even the police was infiltrated by the gangs. So the problem was, how can you deal with that at that moment if you don't have the proper response from the government? Because the government was in collusion. That's what I'm saying. They have, a pact with the gangs. That it was well known, because even the OAS came to El Salvador, to bless the agreement between the gangs and the government. So there were no way for the people. The people has to suffer that, and no one in the international community raised the voice to condemn that. On the contrary, we receive, the blessing of the OAS for the pact between the government and the gangs. So the President Bukele said, no way. This is...
Wait, you believe that the international community, in some iterations, actually wanted the government working with the gangs instead of against the gangs?
Well, that was something, was an approach.
That sounds crazy.
Absolutely insane. But people were desperate. Even some of the high-level members of the Catholic hierarchy, they approved the agreement between the government and the gangs. So, as I said...
Do you think that there were forces in the United States that wanted the government to work with the gangs instead of against them?
At that moment, I am not sure.
Me either, which concerns me.
Absolutely no.
It seems like what you did was so obvious and so smart.
In the state, the people were not aware about what was the situation, the real situation.
Well, I think they're aware now. We are on location here in El Salvador, and I'm continuing my discussion with the president of this wonderful country, the vice president, Felix Ulloa. Mr. Vice President, thank you again for joining me. You have shared this remarkable story of courage and success, and I want to spend some time now talking about the fruit of that success. The United States has just announced that El Salvador is one of the safest countries in the world to visit. I believe it's been that way for some time, and it was actually an error of our prior administration. This wasn't changed sooner. We had the majority and the opposition in our country working together to change this designation. What does it mean to the country of El Salvador to be deemed now, after all you've told us, one of the safest places in the world for tourists to visit, and how will the tourism economy grow?
Well, first of all, let me thank this bipartisan work in the Congress in order to provide and give us to El Salvador this confidence and open for us a window of opportunity for the economic growth. Because after, as President Bukele says in the inauguration speech, when he announces that we are winning the war against gun, and we did the security miracle in El Salvador. And he said this second mandate will try to reach out the economic miracle. So to do that, in order to succeed in our economic growth, we need this confidence and this partnership with the U.S. Keep in mind that we have almost 20% of our population, Salvadoran population, living in the state. We have the remittances flow, which is the first, light item in our national budget. For us, it's very important to maintain this good relationship with the United States people and with the United States government. And as I've said, I'm more than glad hearing that there is a bipartisan approach to give El Salvador this status of being the most security country in the Western Hemisphere. That will allow us to grow in different areas. As you mentioned, tourism is one of them, because other countries that they have the background to receive tourists, as Costa Rica and other countries in South America, they are now with the problem of the violence. Now we solve that problem. The tourism here is, an industry that is growing very fast. We are calling to investors to come over and invest in El Salvador, different fields, hotels, restaurant, sports. We have championships for surf at worldwide level.
I've learned a lot. I am not a surfer, but my wife is, and she tells me that El Salvador has the warm water, no sharks, and it is the land of the everlasting wave, that you can stay on the surfing wave forever. Is that why the championships like to come here?
Absolutely. We are blessed to have the best spot in the whole globe for doing that. Not only because the water temperatures, also the waves, but we have no sharks, which is very important.
You mentioned that 1 out of every 5 Salvadorians lives in the United States. I've seen a number of surveys of your diaspora eager to come home, because the El Salvador they remember when they left maybe was an El Salvador run by the gangs, where over 40,000 people were being killed. And now they see the national band of El Salvador. They see the national ballet of El Salvador. They see your visits to Washington, congressmen coming here. Do you get the sense that we're entering an era where maybe more Salvadorians will be moving home from the United States than moving from here into my country?
Absolutely. And that's why what the President Bukele has called the reverse immigration, because people now are, trying to make true the Salvadorian dream. So they already get the American dream. They work hard, they make savings, they have a small capital, and they want to come back to invest in their communities. So far, we have a report from our central bank that we overpassed $700 million of investors just for the diaspora of El Salvador, which is, a big deal. And for us, when the people feel proud to say, I am a Salvadorian, when in the past, 10 years ago, Salvadorians in the state, they said, no, I'm Mexican, I'm a Colombian. I mean, they feel shame because immediately they were labeled as a gangs. So now they feel proud to say, I'm Salvadorian. And that is the way that now they are trying to come back and to invest in their communities. And this is the reverse immigration that we're expecting.
What is it like for you as the vice president to be a part of that chapter of this nation's story, right there as a key partner to President Bukele leading this national revival?
Just will give you a single information. In the last election, for the first time, Salvadorian living abroad could vote for the presidency. And we got 98% of the votes for President Bukele just from the United States. That is the way that the people express themselves, because they know that the elders, the people, the first generation probably, they want to come back. But the others, they want to live in the state. They are American citizens. They became part of the American culture. They study there, they went to university, they have the properties. I mean, they are real American citizens, and very good citizens, example citizen community. That's we're proud of it, to have also this part of our nation living over there. So for us, it's a matter of sharing, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying as a vice president of El Salvador. We are like a bird with the two wings. One wings that we are living in the national territory, and the other wings we are living in the state. So a bird cannot fly just with one wing, so we need both. There were, our diaspora is part of our proud also as a nation, because they had relevant, Salvadorian, just one person, Frank Rubio. Frank Rubio was the astronaut who spent more time in the space. He was born in El Salvador.
Wonderful.
Yes, his background is Salvadorian.
Well, I think that really the tie to the diaspora also is this great feature of the strong connection between our countries. What we've seen now as an extension of that strong connection is this friendship between President Bukele and President Trump. And in the United States, everyone is fascinated by this. It is obvious to us when President Trump is around someone who makes him happy and comfortable and is a fellow traveler to a strong and peaceful world. How do people in El Salvador think about this great friendship between these two men?
Well, let's say that from the very beginning, in the first term of both, first term of President Trump and first term of President Bukele, they start, connecting each other, shaking hands each other, talking each other. Then it was this hiatus of the presidency, Trump, but now they are both in the second term. And being in the second term and being elected with the majority of their population, they feel like the legitimacy of the leaderships in the country obligate them to lead the nations in different ways. I mean, President Bukele took the challenge to defeat the gangs, to release the population, to free the community from the violence of the gangs, and now building a new nation with prosperity, with economic growth, etc. President Trump is doing the same in their own way.
This pride that you talk about, is it enhanced when the people of El Salvador see how effectively your military handled the transfer of the Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members here? Because we were very proud of that when we saw it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. And, with El Salvador so much in the news in the United States, I wonder how people here are thinking about that. Everyone in El Salvador knew about Sakat, but it's only been in the last few weeks that people in America know about this achievement that you've had, and they see how the laws are working here and how your president operates. How do people in El Salvador feel about El Salvador being now in the news so much in the United States?
Well, there are different approaches, but in the mainstream opinions, people feel proud that in El Salvador we built the safest, penitentiary system in the Americas. And because that, we have been required, both for the superpowers as the United States, to host them some detainees, some inmates. This is not something new. It's not the first time that I saw that, because you could remember when Netherlands, rent their penitentiary system to Norway, to Belgium. I mean, in Europe, Europe gets surprised because Holland said, okay, Norway sent 242 inmates to the Netherlands prison system. So now, when we did that, and then they start, and told the people, the so-called human rights defenders, and these people, this NGO, that they have to live. They have to get some food from their funders, and they need to do that. So,
do you think that El Salvador is the security prison expert in the Americas today?
I think so, because, that is my personal experience. When I was in New York, I met the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Antonio Guterres, in 2022. And we were talking about the state of exception that we just put in place 3 months ago, in March. And they could not understand why we were standing that and how it works in our war against gun. And I told, listen, Mr. Secretary General, send a team with, people from human rights, people from the legal department, the PPA, all of them, to understand what we are going to do over there. But the main concerns of the people in the United Nations was, where are you going to allocate all these people that you are capturing? And I said, we are trying to solve that. And that was the way they did it. We bought a property of 230 acres, very far away from any urban area, because our colonial heritage from Spain, our prison were in the downtown. So
yes.
It was a problem with communication.
Yes.
Cancun,
yeah,
communication,
Secat's not in any downtown.
So we built that prison in a very record time. Less than 1 year, we have built the most safest, the safest penitentiary system in the Americas. And because we have still room, so the United States think about that, and they make this deal between the Secretary of State and our government, which is the way that the government deals each other. So I don't see any problem if there is a precedent in Europe when Holland, Netherlands, deals with Norway and Belgium to do the same. So there is a precedent in Europe.
Indeed. We have talked about the challenges of El Salvador's past, the security and success of the present. My last question for you is about the future. When you look at the next 5 years in El Salvador, you've embraced Bitcoin as a feature of your economy. 18% of your GDP is construction. I think every crane in Central America is here building a skyscraper in San Salvador. What would you want American viewers to know about the future of El Salvador in the next 5 years?
What I would like to send is a message to the American investor to see El Salvador as a window of opportunities, not only in innovation, as you mentioned, because our bet to move in the digital economy is not with the Bitcoin, it's also with the digital assets. We approve a law for digital assets. We have also approved another law to promote with fiscal incentive to companies to come to invest in innovation. But also there are other fields for investing. For instance, the renewable energies, our matrix has changed. Now we are, growing up on solar energy, wind energy, hydropower, biomass, and the most important, which is we have not oil in the undersoil, but we have,
the gold.
Not the gold, because the gold is something that we can talk about that, because there are other minerals, the germanium and others that the person has remarked. No, we have the geothermic energy.
Yes.
Geothermic energy, which is the most clean energy, and we are plenty of that. So, and tourism, of course. I mean, tourism has become our first, first industry to promote our country worldwide. So I see the future in that way. All the opportunities to attract and to bring foreign investor, direct investor, but other is internally. We are transforming El Salvador the first time that the national budget is presented to the Congress with zero deficit. It's very balanced. It's the first time in 100 years there is a balanced budget approved by our Congress that makes our fiscal discipline in the government, in, presenting the macroeconomy issues. Second is that El Salvador not only is the safer country that could be attractive for investing, this also is changing the legal framework in order to avoid red tapes, bureaucracy, and giving a more friendly process for investors to come to El Salvador.
Mr. Vice President, you have been so gracious with your time, and I really think American viewers are going to have a more contextualized and a richer understanding of this incredible country that I've fallen in love with as a consequence of our discussion. Thank you so much, and the best of luck to you and the best of luck to President Bukele in the coming days, weeks, and years.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. Greetings for all the audience.